Hey Skaters fans, Brian Posner here. On today's episode of Down in Sugarland, my co-host Brandon and I will discuss the AL West. We'll give some division predictions. We'll check back in on Astros spring training, an interview with Astros TV color commentator Geoff Blum, and we're going to close it out with Tales from the Control Room. Hit the track.
Looking to relocate? Then contact Nick DeRose for any of your real estate needs in the Dallas Metroplex area. For more information, give them a call at 469-283-8360. DeRose Dallas Realty. Cowboy by nature, agent by trade.
All right, fellas, we are inching closer to opening day here in early April, and let's just do some stereotypical standings talk. And I like to go to Pacoda. It's a baseball Fangraphs, a baseball prospectus, rather, a little tool that uses a lot of different sabermetric stats to make predictions on divisions, player stats, and whatnot. And the AL West, Brandon, in particular, I want to go there, and we'll start from the bottom. The Rangers, they're projected to finish 5th. Seattle, they're in 4th. Oakland at 3rd at 81 and 80. The Los Angeles Angels are projected to finish 86 and 76. And then your Houston Astros, 91 and 70 per Pacoda. That is where they project the Astros to finish. And actually, that's per if you're a big Pacoda believer, that is the second most wins in the American League, only behind the New York Yankees. Brandon, what are your initial thoughts when I'm telling you that?
Well, let's start from the bottom and work the way up. Rangers, they finished last year in 2021, and it's not looking much better in 2021 for them either. Or my apologies, they finished last year in 2020. It's not looking much better in 2021. Their main guy going forward is Joey Gallo, and Joey had a terrible season last year if you really look at his numbers overall. They've got some good pitching prospects coming up, but other than that, it's looking pretty bleak for the Rangers. I don't have much high hopes for them.
They're a young team. You alluded to the young pitching. They traded Lance Lynn in the offseason, who was their ace last year. They got a guy in Dane Dunning from the White Sox, who I think is actually going to be a stud going down the road. A lot of their pitching is very young. You touched on Joey Gallo. He's a guy who, if they fall out of contention early, which is obviously what a lot of people are expecting, he might be trade bait. They made a couple, you can call them, I guess, maybe savvy moves. I think getting David Dahl from the Rockies was a nice little move for them, and they traded away pretty much the centerpiece of their organization, Elvis Andrus, for Chris Davis, and we'll see how that works out.
They're going to be a team that scores runs, but the pitching staff is what's going to be their Achilles heel. If they don't get any pitching, you're right. We're probably going to be able to write them off pretty soon.
Yeah, they're a young team in a new ballpark. They'll be the first time they play in front of fans here, and they've actually opened up their entire ballpark on opening day. That'll be a weird aesthetic to see after all of last year. But yeah, they're a young team. Leody Taveras in center field is an interesting player. Actually, the nephew of Willie Taveras, former Astro, actually former Skeeter too. But a team you're probably not going to have to worry too much about in the standings. And we go up one more, and another team that is pretty far off in the periphery, and that's the Seattle Mariners. However, I will say the Seattle Mariners have some prospects coming up the pipeline that you're going to know a lot about here in the coming years. But as far as this year goes, they're a team that, if they finish in 3rd place, I'd imagine that's probably where they'd peak, right? It's
just interesting because they have good young talent, like you mentioned. And if it can start to be ahead of schedule, they could be one of those teams that comes out of nowhere. They had the Rookie of the Year in Kyle Lewis, who's probably a breakout star by the way he's playing. Young pitching prospects and Justin Dunn and Sheffield as well, but they need a little bit more playing time. The bullpen, that's going to be their biggest issue. They have a couple of names in Munoz and Rafael Montero, but if the bullpen struggles, then they're not going anywhere. But if they can get some legit pitching and the young stars can develop, making a wild card isn't really out of the question. And they haven't been in the playoffs since 2001, so it's time.
Yeah, and then they have a farm system that's universally ranked as a top 5 system. Whether you go to Baseball America, MLB.com, and the reason for that is they have 2 elite level prospects in Jared Kelenic in the outfield and Julio Rodriguez. Those are 2 guys who are projected to be not just all-stars, but elite level talents, MVP contenders, and they've got a lot of good pitchers coming up the pipeline. So this year, kind of like the Rangers again, you're not expecting a lot out of them, but if they, you're going to probably see Kelenic as a midseason call-up for the first time, and he's a guy that, he could be, another Mike Trout in this division.
No, but I expect them to be better than the Rangers, though. I think there will be a significant gap between 5th place, 4th, 3rd, and 2nd, etc.
It could be. And yeah, you touched on some of their younger guys too. They got a guy in Ty France that they picked up for Austin Oil last year. I think is going to be a a stud for them. Mitch Haniger, he's been a proven talent, a former All-Star, and J.P. Crawford, great at shortstop too. Kyle Seager, we know he's been around for a while, so interesting to see where they might finish up here.
I think the real interesting aspect of the division is going to be 3 through 1. Who did they have third?
So Pacoda at third has Oakland, which, I mean, for, Oakland's, their roster's never going to just scream to you like, yeah, division winner. And it never has it. But last year they were the incumbent AL West champions, and they did not lose a ton off their roster from last year. And I know you're thinking, well, they lost Marcus Semien. It's like, yes, but Marcus Semien actually had a kind of a down year last year, and they still ran away with the division. And they replaced him with Elvis Andrus, who he's a guy who's definitely hitting the kind of the sunset of his career, but that is not a bad veteran stopgap at shortstop right there.
They're an interesting team. They're somebody that got hot real early in 2020 and then kind of faded off pretty fast. The hot start is definitely the reason why they won the division. I think if it's a full season, I think the Astros would have surpassed them later on in a deeper run. But you're right. They lost Semien, and also reliever Liam Hendricks. That's going to really hurt in the bullpen. But other than that, I mean, they still have a solid outfield in Chapman and Olsen as well. They can hit. That's the big thing about the team. But the one thing with the A's, and this has probably been forever at this point, is consistency. When they're pitching and hitting, they're like one of the best teams in baseball, but who isn't? But the problem is they go on these really hot streaks and then long cold stretches. I mean, look at last season for any more evidence.
Yeah, and you talked about the bullpen. They did lose Liam Hendricks, who, I mean, I think everyone would agree was the top prize as far as a relief pitcher on the market this year. But then they got Trevor Rosenthal, who was another big name out there on the market, and they got Sergio Romo. Also brought back Yusmeiro Petit. I mean, again, like it's such an A's offseason. They didn't get guys that you're like screaming, like your fans are not going to go crazy about Yusmeiro Petit. However, that's a guy that's going to probably give you about 1 to 2 wins, even wins above replacement. And it is a kind of an anchor there in the bullpen. And I think some of their stars, Matt Olson and Matt Chapman, are super underrated. I mean, whether it's because they play on the West Coast or they play for probably the least notable team on the West Coast, the A's, those guys are guys, if they played maybe on the East Coast or played for a team that was contending, you'd be hearing them in MVP talks.
I think the A's are a bigger threat than the Angels, which they have rated at second, right?
Yeah, let's go right to the Angels. And I mean, I think the reason the Angels, they're a team, they're kind of a darling in terms of sabermetrics because of the guys on their team. But every year you look at their roster, you're like, man, they have Anthony Rendon and Mike Trout, who routinely finish top 5 in WAR each year. But for some reason, Mike Trout, we're still talking, is the same argument we've had every year. He's not in the playoffs again. And now an interesting wrinkle kind of in this year, too, is Shohei Ohtani. We hit 100 miles per hour over the weekend. He's looking like he's going to be a two-way threat this year. That could actually that could be the linchpin, the difference maker for them.
Trout, Rendon, David Fletcher, I mean, big names, and it just really propels the lineup. They also have a deadly 1-2 punch at the top of their starting rotation and for pitching, and Bundy and Haney. But the rest of the rotation, and they got a lot of holes, and their bullpen isn't really that solidified. In fact, I would say that's kind of the Achilles heels for the entire AL West division is bullpens.
Is that Achilles West, the former Cincinnati Bengals quarterback, going from the top rope? I love that right there.
Yeah, right. First, hopefully, a big fan of the show. But no, that's going to be the one thing that's really going to hurt them. It's been the story as old as time, like you said with Trout. Yeah. He's somebody that's the best in the league, but then just doesn't make it to October ever. I think the A's have a stronger case for finishing second in the division than the Angels do.
I mean, I think they do as well, only because they've proven over time that they'll perform more than what their talent tells you they will. And the Angels do the exact opposite. You see these big names, and they have Justin Upton. I mean, Albert Pujols, obviously, very much toward the end of his career. Dexter Fowler, another player they traded for. I don't know. Maybe this is the year. Their rotation, they don't have like a big name there, but they've done a nice job of keeping it even. They added Jose Quintana, a name and a former All-Star, Alex Cobb, another guy, and they'll probably go to a 6-man rotation because of Shohei Ohtani. That's what the plan was when they initially acquired him. So, and at closer, they got Raisel Iglesias from the Cincinnati Reds. And I mean, not an elite level closer, but a guy who maybe gets you a 2-something ERA, maybe 35 saves.
Well, you also can't doubt the new manager, Joe Madden. I mean, he's proven to be a winner everywhere he goes. I mean, he broke the curse with the Cubs, and he brought the Rays to their first World Series appearance. I think if you're going to have a guy who's quirky and is going to mix it up, he's very much needed. But that brings us to the big dogs, and it's no surprise, and we're not being homers by just saying the Astros are going to win the division, but What kind of makes you think that we'll complete it, Ryan?
Well, I mean, they're projected for 91 wins, and that's a sabermetric stat from Baseball Prospectus and Makota. And I think you back it up with the fact that guys like Alex Bregman and Jose Altuve, one has won an MVP, the other is a perennial MVP candidate. And Bregman, they had pretty down years last year. You didn't have Verlander for pretty much the entire year. You're gonna probably maybe get him back at some point. I mean, they're a team that underperformed a lot last year. They were relying on guys like Framber Valdez, who had never pitched above Double-A, and all of a sudden Valdez is starting important games in the playoffs. And I think that's kind of what you look at. You mentioned, I believe it was with the A's, where you saw they might have fell off at the end of the year. I think the Astros would have peaked toward the end of the year because those young guys were just getting their feet wet in the majors. And, they added Michael Brantley, or they re-signed Michael Brantley. That's huge. I think the only real question mark on their team, when you look at their starting nine, is their center fielder, Miles Straw. I think he's kind of the difference maker, maybe whether an 88-win team or a 95-win team.
I think Straw's somebody that's ready to break out, though. I mean, he's so unbelievably elite fast. If you can get him on the base paths, especially with these Astros hitters, he's going to score a ton of runs. Yeah. I'm with you on that. I think the Astros have better hitting than everybody else in the division, and that's what's going to propel them to the top. And I also got to think that what McCullers said after a outing against the Nationals, he even said that we've created a culture here where you're expected to win. And I think that is pretty much true at this point. These guys winning the 2017 World Series, the core's pretty much intact without Springer. That's a huge loss.
Major loss, yeah.
But I think you have enough untapped talent right now that I know they're looking at the prospects, and we may not be rated that high. I think that we're going to have those guys playing on our team, and they're going to surprise everybody. And it's starting to show in spring training. And
you mentioned Joe Madden being a winning manager. I mean, Dusty Baker, I would put maybe not in that same breath, but he's right there. I mean, I know he has never won a World Series, but he's pretty. I mean, he's a guy that I consider one of the better managers in the game. And look at the rotation. I mean, they've lost Framber Valdez to a finger injury. Still no clarification on when he comes back. But you had Jake Odorizzi, who was an All-Star in 2019. I mean, that is a major pickup, a good young bullpen. They added Ryan Stanek and Pedro Baez, and I think they're going to have. I think 91 wins is a pretty solid projection for them. Well, I mean, either way, the AL West is going to be interesting. I think those top three teams, Brandon, like we were talking about, it's going to be a tight race. When we come back, Brandon and I are going to check in on the latest from Port St. Lucie and what's going on in Astros camp. You're listening to Down in Sugarland.
Baseball is back at Constellation Field, and full-season ticket deposits are now available. May 20th is just around the corner, and you won't want to miss exciting baseball this summer as the Skeeters enter their first season as the AAA affiliate of the Houston Astros. For more information, visit sugarlandskeeters.com and be one of the first to reserve a seat.
All right, Brandon, we're getting into the last couple of weeks here, the final sprint, if you will, in spring training, and man, it's just making me want to see some real live baseball, Major League Baseball coming in April 1st, opening day. And as we check into Astros camp here, there's not a whole lot to be answered. They've got a pretty complete roster as it is, but the leadoff spot seems to be one of those things that's getting a lot of talking about here. As you know, they got some options. You got your Jose Altuve's, your Miles Straws, your Carlos Correa's, and it looks like it could be Altuve. I mean, and he's arguably your best hitter. Do you hate that or love that Altuve might be batting leadoff?
I think it's really interesting. They're trying to find somebody to replace Springer's pop, because the best thing about Springer is he would lead off and you could start the game 1-0 real quick, one pitch. I think Altuve has the opportunity to provide that same kind of pop of the bat, but he's probably a better contact hitter, can drive the ball on the ground in between the gaps, more so than Correa would be. I know Correa was kind of a hot pick to replace that power at the top of the lineup for Springer, but I think Altuve will be a nice fit there. My dark horse, actually, is Kyle Tucker. I think he might climb the ladder and be able to hit that leadoff spot just because of his great speed as well. Miles Straw, another name you might see as well. But I expect Straw to probably slot in that ninth hole where is known as the second leadoff hitter. And talk about, wow, incredible. If you can get his speed on base and then you have Altuve leading at the top of the lineup, that's a really wise play that I think they can kind of mess around with a little bit. So I love it.
Yeah, Kyle Tucker. I haven't really heard his name kicked around, and it's kind of confusing because I do like that a little bit. I like the idea of maybe Tucker batting leadoff, and I think lineup construction gets a little too much played. In my opinion, I'm more of a guy like, hey, man, just bat your best hitters towards the top of the lineup. Maybe you're not the best hitters towards the bottom. Put guys like Jordan Alvarez in the middle where they're going to have chances to drive them in. But, I mean, Altuve, as a guy who, I mean, if I hate it or love it, I would probably put more towards love it. I think getting him more at bats doesn't hurt your cause. I would probably hate it more if it was Miles Straw batting leadoff, because I think he's a guy who hasn't put up great on base numbers in his career. The speed is 80 grade. I mean, he's got some of the best speed in baseball, but he's a guy maybe you don't want him to have to come up and get more at bats than a guy like Correa or Altuve.
Well, Straw has had a great spring training, and you also have to think about he's been an on-base machine for this spring training, and you have to think about the teams that we're playing as well. We only play 4 teams because of COVID: the Mets, the Nationals, the Marlins, and the Cardinals. And when you think about those teams and who they're facing from pitching, Strasburg, Max Scherzer, DeGrom, and even future stars like Sixto Sanchez from the Marlins, and he's been somebody who's been getting on base against those guys, I think could translate nicely in the regular season where he's not seeing some of the best arms in baseball. I think Straw could be a very interesting pick. I understand what you mean. His bat still needs to come around, but I don't think people understand how fast this guy is.
Yeah, I mean, he really does have, if you just go by the speed tool, he's a top 5 player in Major League Baseball, I think. And I mean, I think one of the maybe the underrated facts, Brandon, you're talking about Miles Straw, is that there was a big worry, like, who will take over the center field spot? And it looks like he's kind of squelched any maybe like doubt about, I mean, obviously, you already alluded to Springer's being pretty big shoes to fill, but I think he's pretty much made it his job. Like, he is the center fielder going to opening day. Now we're back to the lineup is a different story. There are some other jobs, though, that are on the line. One of them that's not on the line anymore is opening day starter, and that's going to go to Zach Greinke, which another one, I don't think there was a lot of indecision about that. And also Greinke responded to it like you would think Zach Greinke would. He said, I don't really care. That's a very Zach Greinke-esque response, but it is his 5th opening day start. He had a few with the Royals, Diamondbacks, and now with the Astros, and I think that's a no-brainer.
You and I have talked a lot of off-air, and we've kind of both alluded to the fact that opening day starter, a little bit overrated in a 162-game season. You know, it's one of those that it's just fun for the W. I think it's more of a mental thing than anything, but
ceremonious.
100%. It's a badge of honor type of deal. Greinke was the no-doubter. I mean, if you're talking about Verlander being healthy, you're going to mix up that probably a little bit more. But he's, I mean, solid starter. I mean, he's going to give the Astros a fantastic chance to start the season 1-0. I like that play a lot in terms of leading him off, but you and I kind of are leading to it. It was just a no-doubter about it.
Yeah, I mean, and you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, the only question you may have had is, I guess, if Verlander's healthy, but I mean, I think what's more interesting is how it rounds out. I mean, McCullers Jr., Jose Urquidy, Christian Javier, and it doesn't look like Jake Odorizzi is going to make the opening day roster. He might make the opening day roster, but he's not going to make the first turn, at least in the rotation. It looks like more of a mid-April slot for him, but that's your rotation right there. You got Greinke, McCullers, Urquidy, Javier, and then Jake Odorizzi, and then fingers crossed on Framber Valdez. Haven't really got any update on him yet, but that also is another guy you got to keep an eye on. I mean, obviously, the addition of Odorizzi doesn't make it look like he might be back anytime real soon, but you're also keeping your fingers crossed.
And McCullers, wow, what a spring training that guy's been having. He looks lights out. He's somebody that is probably going to have a really scary season in terms of just dominating on the mound if he's looked as solid this early. And you also alluded to Javier. I think he's somebody that could surprise people. Christian Javier is a gigantic broad shoulder right-hander. I mean, he is a massive mountain of a man. Smooth mechanics. He's got a deceptive way he hides the baseball in his release. Think kind of like a Pedro Martinez. So that kind of two-seamer out of his hands just explodes. The only thing Javier really needs to work on that he's been trying in spring training is keeping the ball down. He will be able to elevate that baseball a little bit, but he's got the speed as well. If he keeps that ball and he's able to climb the ladder, he's got good heat coming off that hand as well.
Yeah, I mean, he rose to the occasion big time last year. He's a guy that probably would have started with Corpus Christi last year, realistically. And not only did he get to the majors, he became a valuable contributor at the major league level. Jose Urquidy, Astros fans know him obviously very well, was a big time contributor to the 2019 World Series campaign. I mean, moving to the bullpen, another one that it looks like most of those spots are locked up. There's some question in the back end. Andre Scrub left the game last week, but it looks like Andre Scrub actually avoided the worst of what it looked like. He came off and it looked pretty bad, but no word on his status yet, but they're hoping it's not going to be anything too serious. If that's the case, if he ends up missing the beginning of the year, that seems like it really does open up a spot for Steve Cishek to open with the team, and that's a nice veteran presence. A nice guy, too, where can go down. He changes the arm angle. Obviously, I wouldn't call him like a sidewinder, but he's kind of like almost like a three-quarter-ish between sidewinder and in that range. A nice guy to have there, and it could mean that Luis Garcia ends up starting with the big club as a reliever, kind of a long man as well.
Well, I mean, last year in 2020, it was the first year ever that the fastball usage was under 50% as a league. It's been hovering around 50% for the past couple of years, but that goes to show you how baseball's changed. It's always get ahead with the fastball, then hit them off with the breaking speed. But that's not the case anymore with these guys. And you highlighted him, Steve Cishek. With that crazy arm motion, he's been a big league pitcher. He was with the Cubs, he was with the Reds, and he's somebody that has great release point. The only problem with the sidearm kind of guy, when they leave him flat, man, you can tee off. Yeah. But when they're on, untouchable, and he's going to be somebody that will really look good as well. And Noli Paredes, he's somebody that was probably slated to pitch with us, but is now showing an amazing spring training that
he's never going back.
Yeah, I think he's booked himself moving up to the majors, and he's going to solidify himself there. I mean, talk about an explosive right-hander. He moves around a lot on that mound. I mean, he's a max effort guy, electric fastball. I mean, he does give up a lot of contact to hitters, but when he's on, I mean, like you said, he's never coming back.
Yeah, I mean, and we'll hear from Geoff Blum here in a minute, and he's big on it, only Paredes as well, and I mean, they added Pedro Baez, and that actually is another interesting storyline too, is he was diagnosed with COVID-19, so they're ramping him back up. He may not start the season on with the big club, so that could open up another spot. And also Brandon Belak, another guy to kind of keep an eye on. He was a guy you maybe kind of slated in as maybe the opening day starter for the Skeeters, but because of injuries and because of Odorizzi ramping himself up, he might actually be a guy that is that number 5 starter, at least for the first turn.
Absolutely. Now, moving from pitching to some of the hitters that I'm excited about, Pedro Leone. I mean, just because he is a 22-year-old from Cuba. I mean, we signed him for a $4 million in the offseason. He's probably going to start in Double-A Corpus, but there's not much footage on him because he's a kid from Cuba. We're really seeing him for the first time in spring training as we're watching him. He's not like a gigantic in stature kind of guy, but my Lord, when he makes contact with the ball, he hits like he's the size of Aaron Judge. He plays shortstop, outfield, cannon for an arm, great speed on the base paths. He's somebody that I'm the most excited for going forward as an Astros fan.
I don't think you're alone in that, Brandon, because I think there's a lot of buzz around him for that reason you mentioned. It's kind of almost like a Pandora's box with him, and there's not a lot of footage on him. He did start on Monday in a B game at shortstop. I mean, the idea of him, I think a lot of fans envision him as the George Springer replacement. That's kind of what I think a lot of people see him as. I mean, Carlos Correa is a free agent too, so you never know. Maybe he's the shortstop of the future. A lot to like there. And I mean, when you talk about maybe a middle infielder of the future, though, Jeremy Pena, we talked about the guys the Astros have faced in the spring training. He has a home run off Jacob deGrom in spring training, which I think is pretty great. He also popped one against Trevor Rogers and the Marlins. He actually leads the Astros in home runs in spring. And Jeremy Pena is a guy where I think he's going to be a pretty quick riser. I don't think he'll start with the Skeeters, but I think he's shown enough in spring that I think he'll be at AAA at some point this year.
What's nuts about Jeremy Pena, he actually went to University of Maine. And out of school, he really didn't get many offers. It wasn't until he actually went to a kind of like a travel team tournament to where he met a coach that contacted University of Maine. They saw him, they're like, yeah, let's get him out here. And my Lord, he turned out into a phenomenal prospect. He won Rookie of the Year in the Dominican League. His dad was a pro ball player for many years for the Indians. I mean, big kid, powerful legs, can really drive the ball deep. He's not a typical looking shortstop. I mean, he is a massive stature type of person. But my Lord, I mean, he probably would be starting shortstop for the Astros if it wasn't for all those guys ahead of him with Correa, Pedro Leone, Bergman, Altuve.
Yeah.
But you're right. If he comes here, he is going to be an absolute star to watch.
Yeah, I think as far as position players go, he's definitely someone the Skeeters fans should have an eye on because he's going to be a guy you want to come and see. And I think kind of, as we round this segment out, a nice little roster battle going on. I think it really is the truest quote-unquote roster battle is between Abraham Toro and Robel Garcia. We'll hear a little more about Garcia in our upcoming interview with Blum, but that's interesting because you got a switch hitter in Toro, a switch hitter in Garcia. They both play a little infield. Garcia plays outfield, which may honestly be the differentiating factor, but I think that's your true roster battle right there is that last spot on the bench here, this kind of last couple weeks of spring training.
Yeah, we talked about both of those guys on the previous podcast, and you're 100% right. It's going to be coming down to the wire with those guys. And not only that, maybe if they're one swinging a hotter bat, one's a little bit colder, you might see them intertwine between the pros and Constellation.
Absolutely. And seeing Abraham Torre on here, I'd be excited about that, as well as Robel Garcia. Well, we have got a treat here up next. When we come back, I interview former Major Leaguer and Astros TV color commentator Geoff Blum. You're listening to Down in Sugarland. All right, we're now joined on Down in Sugarland by former Major Leaguer and current Astros color commentator Geoff Blum, who I know, Blum, I know you wish you're at spring training with the team right now, but you and TK and Julia have been doing a really good job providing coverage from back home. And I kind of wanted to start there, man. I mean, you're a broadcast veteran, but how difficult has it been calling all these games, going back from last year and now leading up to this year from a monitor rather than being there in person?
First of all, good to be on with you guys. I appreciate the opportunity, and you are exactly right in assuming the fact that it is not exactly the same as being there in person. One of the unique things about being in spring training is the ability to get down there and kind of be seen and see some of the guys and create that relationship that you usually try and nurture throughout the course of the season to get some stories, to get, tidbits or find out if a guy's hurting a little bit or see if he's working on any techniques. So we're kind of stuck in our own little bubble in the studio downtown as we're doing games from the road. And it's not a lot of fun. At first you kind of had the idea in 2020 that, we're going to do our best to bring the game to everybody back home. And so you kind of, bit the bullet and said, okay, we're going to make this as best we can. And fortunately, I work with TK and Julia, who are phenomenal humans to begin with, and then they're excellent broadcasters at the same time. So we really fed off of each other, and I feel like we did a good job. So I appreciate you saying that. But sitting in a cold, dark room where all you hear is your voice is not the idea of baseball for me. My idea of baseball is hearing the crowd, feeding off the energy, and creating a vibe that way. But trying to create it by ourselves in a studio is not exactly a lot of fun. And of course, we miss so many different things. There's so many different aspects and angles of baseball that we miss by sitting in a studio and watching it on a monitor. I'd rather be at a bar sitting next to you guys having a beer talking about the game.
Absolutely. Hey, we got to pencil that one in at some point here down the road. I wanted to ask you, so how familiar were you with the Skeeters, prior to finding out they were the AAA team? And then what was your, general reaction when you did find out that they were going to be the AAA affiliate for the Astros?
My initial knowledge of the Sugarland Skeeters was, the facility itself. Everything I heard before I figured out it was an independent team was the facility was a great place to watch a game. Fans were always energized by it. And then I've had a couple of chances since moving here in 2017 to actually check the ballpark out. And I can see why it's so conducive to fans because it's easy to get to. It's within the vicinity of Houston. So there's a lot of surrounding areas that have access to Sugarland. But then it was, you found out it was an independent ball club, and you start to hear about, some Darryl Ward and, Willie Taveras and some of these guys who are trying to either hang on to their career or extend their career going down and playing in Sugarland. And it kind of intrigued me in that sense and kind of gave me the idea that baseball down there actually was pretty good. Even though those guys weren't on big league contracts or minor league contracts, I knew they still played hard. And, then it spiraled into an opportunity where the Astros and this unique minor league baseball environment that has been created over the last 2 years, that the Astros had a chance to purchase it and make it, their AAA stadium, which I think is, in watching major league organizations work, I think the access of having a AAA team so close really benefits the organization, and it obviously benefits the players with the ability to play AAA and get to the big league level so quickly, in a logistical sense. But at the same time, how about the fans? If you're a fan of minor league baseball or an organization and you have the ability to be within, a 30, 40-minute vicinity of a major league team and the AAA team, think about that creates a certain loyalty with a fan and an organization that I think is incredibly unique. And kudos to the Astros and Sugarland for making it happen.
Yeah, we're pumped. You hit on the nail on the head there. It is unique. I believe only the St. Paul Saints are actually closer to their affiliate. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And, kind of going down that road, you're obviously incredibly plugged into the Astros. Who are some guys, whether they might not start at Sugarland, whether that's because they're at the Class A level or AA, or maybe they'll be at the major league level. Who are some guys that might be here in Sugarland that you think are really exciting and fans are going to kind of want to, they're worth the price of admission, I guess you could say?
Oh man, I wish I had my binder with me because the Astros have actually done a good job of nurturing good young talent. Chas McCormick is a guy who has an opportunity to make the team. If he doesn't, he's going to be in AAA, and he's going to be a guy who maybe bounces back and forth because he's a valuable resource in the outfield. I'm just trying to go through position by position. And, in the infield, a guy like Rabel Garcia is kind of, splashed onto the scene as a utility guy. I'm not sure if he has a chance to make the big league team. I like him just because he can play multiple positions. He can switch hit. He's very similar to a Marwin Gonzalez type. But if you get a chance to see him in Houston or in Sugar Land, I think it would be a lot of fun to watch him because I think he's got big league potential. And then, of course, you guys and everybody who watches baseball, especially the Astros, knows that there are so many good young arms that you are eventually going to see get to Sugar Land. And you're going to see guys moving between AA, Corpus Christi to Sugar Land to Houston, back to Sugar Land. Luis Garcia is a guy who I think has the potential to be in a rotation. We saw a couple of guys yesterday. Trying to think, Brian Abreu is actually a guy who really impressed me yesterday. We've always been high on him, but he's still a young 23-year-old with an electric arm. I don't know where he fits in the big leagues this year. So I think AAA is really a place where he can hone his skills. That's a guy to keep an eye on. And, there's just some other guys. Unfortunately, you missed out on Enoli Paredes. I think he's going to be in the bullpen for the Astros. Andre Scrub is another guy who I think is going to be in the bullpen for the Astros. And it's kind of disappointing that you miss out on guys like Forrest Whitley, due to injury and things like that. But there are going to be plenty of guys that you hear us talking about on our Houston broadcast that you will see in Sugar Land and eventually see and be able to follow from Sugar Land to Houston.
Yeah, we're definitely really excited about that. You're right. I mean, there was so many guys last year. I mean, like that. They just skipped that whole AAA level, and they did so well that like from Valdez to another guy, like they're not coming baback. So it's crazy. And I want to go in a different route here. I mean, there are girl dads, and then there's Geoff Blum. I mean, you got 4 daughters. I know you've got triplets, all daughters, and they're all, from what I understand, incredibly talented volleyball players. I just wanted to know, what is it like to be a father to 4 daughters, and maybe how has this last year almost been like a benefit for you because you probably got a little more time to spend at home with them?
No, you're absolutely right. This last year, as rough as it's been with the COVID issues, it really allowed me the opportunity to be around a little bit more often. But if you go back to, 2003, my oldest daughter was born, and then in 2005, I have triplets. So immediately I've got 4 girls. And if you are a male and you've ever dated a woman or you are married to you understand the financial obligation to a female. and immediately when I had the girls, the dollar, it was like something out of a cartoon where the dollar signs are just going through my head. And that's the reason why I played as long as I could, and I'm broadcasting as long as I can, because I know that there's going to be colleges and weddings to attend to. But the great part is this last year with COVID and not being able to travel and my girls' volleyball season being pushed back a month, I was actually able to be a little more available and be a fan of what they're going out there and doing. And it just so turned out that my oldest, who plays varsity out there at Seven Lakes High School, they go on a tear in district and lose 1 match. They get into the playoffs and they run through districts, they run through areas, and they're playing in regional tournaments to get to state. And my oldest daughter has, she has an impact. She's a junior and she's an outside hitter and had an opportunity to have some key plays throughout this playoff run. And eventually we end up in Dallas watching them play for the Texas State 6A championship. And I got to, I was one of the first people to hug her after they clinched their state championship title. So it's been really a blessing in disguise, but really a great opportunity for me to be a father of 4 amazing volleyball players and get a chance to watch them.
Yeah, that's great, man. I love hearing like people who are able to kind of find those silver linings. I know it was a tough 2020 year. So you got to play in a World Series with the White Sox in 2005, and I know you got beaten over the head by Astros fans, I'm sure, for that big home run you hit. So we don't have to
continually.
We don't have to go over that. But I wanted to know. So you've also gotten to call 2 World Series now in 17 and 19. How do the nerves of getting ready to suit up for a game like in a World Series with the White Sox compare to getting ready to call one like you did with the Astros?
You know what? being able to play in one is unique in itself, because that's something that as a player or an athlete in any sport, that is something you ultimately work for. It's when you're 12 years old and you're in your backyard, and your mind and your imagination start to run wild, and you're like, okay, I'm in the game 7 of the World Series, and you're facing so-and-so, and you hit a bomb, to walk off the World Series and, be the next Joe Carter type thing. So the fact that you're able to, live out a fantasy that you shared with your family, you've shared with your friends, and you understand, how much, pain and sweat your family put into getting you to this point, makes it that much more special. So as an athlete, it was incredible. It's the pinnacle of your sport. It's something that nobody will ever be able to take away from me, which I am eternally grateful for. But unfortunately, the unique thing about broadcasting for regional sports is when they go to the playoffs, they go national, and we get shut out. So my covering the World Series and the playoff runs is kind of unique in the sense that, I'm kind of available to everybody. And I've been on ESPN radio shows. I've been on ESPN TV shows. I've done several different, outlets when these teams are doing well that I get a chance to be a part of. So it was a lot of, speculating and projecting and touting a great organization and a great team. And that's what was a lot of fun for me, is to actually go on these shows, talk about these teams, have an expectation on them, and then sit in the stands and actually enjoy it as a fan and watch these guys go out there and do something that, obviously I was able to do and appreciate. And that was probably the most fun. And and again, it goes back to almost feeling like a proud papa of what these guys were able to go out and do.
Yeah, I totally blanked on that. I forgot. Yeah, you guys don't have, as a regional network, you don't get to call the games, which is kind of a bummer, but obviously great to be on the national stage for those guys. Kind of want to go to a different direction here. I couldn't help but notice that you were on Cameo, which I think is awesome, and I kind of wish I had the pull to go on there and have people wanting me to do that.
Hey, fire it out there, man. You never know.
Right? I hope so. I got to shoot my shot. But I wanted to know, what's the weirdest or maybe coolest cameo request you've gotten so far?
That one actually, it's been interesting because the creativity of fans, knows no bounds. And, I've done the typical, birthday shout outs, wedding anniversaries, but some of the more unique have been, pumping guys up for their bachelor parties, and things like that. But one of the most fun ones I've had, or a couple of the ones that I've done that I've had the most fun doing, have actually been for fantasy baseball, announcements, or a fantasy baseball draft pick, or even for fantasy football, talking a little trash for somebody, or, announcing a pick and announcing, that this league is coming into fruition. And this is, that's the announcing the beginning of it. So that's probably even the most fun and the most unique, is being able to kind of, get some information and put my own personal Geoff Blum spin on things and talk a little bit of trash and have some fun in that way. Cause there's no repercussion for me. Yeah. I'm just firing it out there for these people. So that's been a lot of fun, but there's actually been more than I thought, at least a handful of times where I have had the opportunity to, provide motivation for somebody who's battling cancer. Somebody who's coming back from a devastating injury, or, there was actually, I got an email, through my website from a guy who I did a cameo for that is fighting alcoholism. And I mean, for them to say, it literally said, "Thank you for inspiring me every day. I watch the cameo every day as I fight alcoholism." And I was blown away by the fact that that's actually another great way that something like as simple as Cameo can have an impact on somebody's life. So, to be honest, as cheesy as Cameo can be, I don't take it for granted.
That's really cool, man. That's a great story right there to end that one. So you retired in 2012, and if I have it right, you went right into the booth in 2013. Did you when did you decide that you wanted your next phase of your career to be as a broadcaster? And did that have any effect on the timing of your retirement?
I decided to become a broadcaster when they offered me the job.
I love it.
No, it was one of those things, at the end of my career in 2012, I was with the Arizona Diamondbacks, and I felt like I literally had body parts falling off. And I finally got the hint that, my career was ending. And fortunately, throughout my career, I'd never said no to an interview. I kind of took a little bit of pride in the fact that, reporters and, TV cameras and radio shows would come ask me questions. because I provided them a unique, different soundbite, not the typical day. So I was talking to Darren Erstead. I had a chance to talk to Mark Loretta, Brad Osmus, guys who stayed in the game. And my question to them was, why did you get back in so quickly? And the comment was, once you're out, it's so hard to get back in. And that's where I kind of had the intention at the end of 2012 is to try and stay in the game somehow. So I was greasing every wheel that I had, whether it be front office, coaching, or getting into the, broadcasting and things like that. I had an opportunity in 2013 to go interview with the Astros because that was right around the time Jim Crane bought the team. And Milo was retiring, and they were firing the other two guys that were doing radio. So there were 3 opportunities, I thought, in radio. Jim DeShays moved to the Chicago Cubs. Bill Brown was pulling back on games and only doing home games. So I knew there were 2 opportunities there. And I just kind of wanted to get my name out in the atmosphere of baseball to let people know that I was interested in staying in the game. And it just so happened that I crushed the interview, convinced the right people, and I got a phone call saying that they wanted to hire me to do the road games. And I jumped at it, and it was probably the best decision I've ever made because I truly, honestly, absolutely 100% love my job with the Houston Astros.
Yeah, no, we're thankful you did. And I mean, it's awesome you were able to find a kind of a broadcast home, like right as you got out of your career like that. Just had 2 more here for you, Geoff. I mean, first, I find it so interesting that you got a chance to begin your career with the Montreal Expos. I find everything about the Expos interesting for some reason. I mean, just because obviously the history, now they're no longer a team, but do you have any cool artifacts or memories just from being able to play in Montreal while you were out there?
As far as artifacts, I still have a ton of, not a ton, but I still have all, most of my uniforms, and every once in a while, we've moved so many times that I still pull out, a random t-shirt or a pair of workout shorts that are kind of embarrassing because, they're not nearly as nice or as good as they are now. And they don't fit anymore. But, some of the cool things that I do have, it's obviously the pictures and some of the video I have, but I think one of the most enduring memories that I do have of Montreal is, and you guys have probably seen this picture. It's a picture of Vladimir Guerrero with his son, Vlad Jr., on the field, kind of tipping their cap before a game. And that one sticks with me because I was on the field for that.
Nice.
And, trying to explain to my daughters that I played for a team that doesn't exist anymore, and then pointing to Vlad Jr. on the screen and going, that guy right there who's hitting bombs in the big leagues and is going to be a perennial all-star like his dad. My wife is in the tunnel flipping this young man at 3 years old and watching what he was doing. So we had an idea that Vlad Jr. was going to be somebody because obviously his dad was so good, but we actually had an opportunity to watch him, be raised around the game. So that was a lot of fun. But I have a lot of, there's a lot of emotion when it comes to Montreal, just because it was where I broke in. It was a foreign country to me. They all spoke French. It was a unique atmosphere where you got to work your way through the minor leagues with all of these guys and break into the big leagues with them. So there was a unique connection to all those guys on that team that I was with, because we were on, single A, double A, triple A, and the big leagues together before we moved on to other organizations. But, I will always have a fondness in my heart for Montreal, and I would not be upset if it came back into the rotation, because that was a great spot to be.
Yeah, I mean, and just A+ unis too. I love the jersey kit they had going on.
Yeah, they'll never be able to match what they did up there. It's amazing, that they did have such a unique logo. It's like they actually put effort into that thing, and it turned out great.
It certainly did. Yeah, that's crazy with the Vladdy Jr. story. I love that. Well, I just wanted the last one here. I mean, you kind of touched on it. You're a Cal Golden Bear, and I'm a California myself. I think that's an ideal place for anyone to spend 4 years and get a degree. And interestingly enough, there's a Cal Golden Bear in the system, a guy we might see here at some point in Sugar Land. That's Corey Lee, the catcher, first-round pick a few years back. Is there any kind of special bond you maybe have been able to develop with him? And kind of what's your overall impression of him? I know he's one of the top 10 prospects here in the organization right now.
Yeah, we actually had a chance to talk to him for Astroline about a month ago, and it was great for me to be able to connect with him because, like you, everything I saw and read was just through the internet or it was through a video. So it was great to actually, kind of get your head wrapped around and meet this guy and see what he was all about. But one thing I learned in that conversation is he's a pretty good athlete, and he's taken some ground balls at third base, moving around the infield, maybe exploring the idea of being versatile or moving out from behind home plate. I think catching is a unique position in this day and age with as hard as guys throw. But I also think it's a benefit to maybe have a guy who went to Cal and understands, the more cerebral side of playing the game. And it really came out in the interview and talking with them. Obviously, he's very well spoken, but he understands, how hard pitching is and what he has to do behind the plate to make the pitcher better. And that's one thing I think, isn't talked about enough is how catchers are basically behind home plate, not only to make some of these pitches look good, but they're back there as psychologists and encouragers of these pitchers, trying to get them to be the best they possibly can be. And I think that's one skill that's highly underrated, but it seems like Corey has a pretty good handle on how to go out there and handle pitchers. I also like the fact that he tells stories about playing with Andrew Vaughn, who was a number 1 pick out of Cal the same year he was the number 1 pick for the Astros. Mm-hmm. And, he spoke about taking advantage of an opportunity because they were all there looking at Andrew Vaughn, and he decided to work a little bit harder on his offense. He started to crush the ball, and he was obviously in a good batting order, part of the batting order with Cal, to put up good numbers, and he did, and he got recognized for it. And now he's, a number 1 pick. So I thought that was a kind of a cool story. And one thing I've learned in my years being a professional baseball player and connecting with other Golden Bears, there's a really special, connection between those guys, because we all understand that being a student athlete itself is extreme in every sense wherever you go to school. And then you add the academics of a University of California to that. And there's a certain amount of respect between guys who went to Cal and tried to get as good grades as they got and play in the Pac-12 conference and compete at Cal. But it's a special place. I still go back there every time we go through Oakland. I go over to campus and have breakfast with my college coach, Bob Milano. He's still, hobbling around, but I get back on campus every chance I get. And there's a special bond and players who come out of Cal.
Yeah, that's a great point too. I don't know if a lot of people who don't live maybe like in California would know that's like an impossible school to get into. So it is. It's
oh man, truly, it's getting worse. It's amazing.
I can't believe. Okay, well, real quick, give me your favorite Cal football player of all time then before we get out of here.
Oh man, Sean Dawkins.
There we go. Nicely done. All right. Well, Geoff, thank you so much for joining us, man. We really appreciated the chat here, and we'll have to get TK on at some point to complete this little broadcast booth hat trick, and just can't wait to see her at Constellation Field sometime this year, man. Really appreciate it.
No, I think it would be great to get down there and watch some ball games at Sugar Land. I think everybody else should too, but it would be an opportunity to get down there and meet you guys. It would be a blast. I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. That's Geoff Blum. We'll be back here down in Sugar Land in just a moment.
Looking to relocate? Then contact Nick DeRose for any of your real estate needs in the Dallas Metroplex area. For more information, give them a call at 469-283-8360. DeRose Dallas Realty. Cowboy by nature, agent by trade.
That was a great chat with Geoff Blum, and a guy who obviously is very well spoken. We saw him go from his career right as a player, literally less than a year later as a broadcaster, and just loved chatting with him. Brandon, what were some of the things you took away from that?
Right off the bat, when he was talking about having to call games in just a lonely room and all by yourself, and how awkward it is to be speaking out and just hearing your voice, I can relate to that. I've had to work a couple of broadcasts where the play-by-play guys are just in a room and they're not at the ballpark, and you can kind of feel a lack of chemistry. And that's something that I know has to be such a hard adjustment for that. I can't imagine how lonely it is, and especially on a much bigger scale calling Astros games.
Yeah, and especially for a guy like Geoff Blum who played 14 years in the majors, not being at the ballpark probably irks him maybe more than it would anybody else. I mean, that's going to be tough.
Well, it's extremely awkward. It's no different than right now. Be in your living room, mute the TV, and call the game. It's so hard to do, and you just kind of lose the atmosphere. When you're there, you're a little bit more enthralled. You feel a part of it, to when you're away from the game, calling it on a screen, it's really hard to do, and he makes it look easy.
And I mean, don't get it twisted. I mean, to do that from a monitor is not easy. I mean, you're thinking, oh, you're seeing the same thing. It's like, no, you're not. You're definitely not. You have monitors to help you while you're also watching the game in person. So to go from one to the other is pretty difficult. And I thought it interesting too. I mean, a guy like Geoff Blum, I mean, he said he played a couple extra years because, he has 4 daughters and he's got a wife and he's got to make sure that he can provide for them as, he's got weddings to plan for. college is playing for. I'm sure his daughters are all going to want to play college volleyball. They're incredibly talented. I thought that was pretty interesting as well.
Oh, his wedding budget must be 3 seasons net worth. I mean, oh my Lord, so many daughters. But I've actually seen his daughter play at Seven Lakes up in the Katy area. He's not messing around, man. She's an absolute beast. Outside hitter, she can bring the pain coming down. It was fun doing her games because when I read the back of the jersey, I was like, Blum, huh? And then the guy I was calling the games with, he was like, oh, that's Geoff Blum's daughter. Little I know, full circle, he'd be on the pod.
Yeah, that's great. No, and I'm happy to hear that he was able to kind of go see some more games this year. I mean, you hear stories of people that kind of this year actually helped him in some ways. 2020 being a pandemic year, and it seemed like that kind of helped him a little bit going to see them play a little more.
I think my favorite part of the interview was how you beefed up his play-by-play career by giving him credit for calling World Series games. That was pretty awesome.
I know, right? I did not realize that, and I won't disclose what team I root for, but I grew up rooting for a team that didn't make the playoffs a lot. So it didn't occur to me that, oh yeah, the TV guys don't actually call the games. And you know what the worst part was? Like I'm writing that question. I'm like, good for you, Ryan. That's a good question. You did a good job, buddy. And then never mind. Throw that one away.
Right now he's probably like, I bet a lot of people don't know that fact, and he's just updating his resume right now. Called World Series games in 17 and 19. Man. That was an absolute hilarious part. But I mean, interesting guy. I mean, has walk of life from everything that he's doing, from fatherhood to being a player to calling games. I mean, just somebody that we need to have on again to go through that 05 World Series. I know that's taboo to talk about, but I would love to know, the mindset of going into World Series. How much different is it from a playoff game to game one of the World Series? Is it an atmosphere thing, or is it just a mindset type of situation? I think he's somebody that could bring great perspective for it.
Right. And also is Frank Thomas. You got to play with Frank Thomas. I think that's another rabbit hole we can go down another time. And also he said, we're getting beers apparently. So we'll have to reconvene at some point.
I heard that, Spot. I think the next one's going to be on us to try to cover some of his daughter's budget there for him. So
yeah, they got the wedding budget down. And also one little quick note, which we didn't get to the interview. He actually is immortalized with a statue at the White Sox Stadium. It's not just him; it's a statue of a couple of players, but that 05 World Series, I'm like, God, man, that's so cool that Geoff Blum, he's got a statue. He goes to that ballpark. Obviously, on the road, he'll go there. Maybe not this year, but in years past, he gets to go and see himself in a statue. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, there's a lot more Geoff Blum stories that are untapped, and hopefully he starts to uncork them here on our podcast.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to finish out episode number 3 of Down in Sugarland with our first ever Tales from the Control Room.
Baseball is back at Constellation Field, and full season ticket deposits are now available. May 20th is just around the corner, and you won't want to miss exciting baseball this summer as the Skeeters enter their first season as the AAA affiliate of the Houston Astros. For more information, visit sugarlandskeeters.com and be one of the first to reserve a seat.
Okay, let's end this episode number 3 with Tales from the Control Room. Our first ever episode is going to center around me. None other than me. Yeah, I know, right? And we'll take you back to June 2018. A young Ryan was interning with the Skeeters, just a young whippersnapper, didn't know what was in front of him. And all of a sudden, our mascot approached me and the rest of the interns and told me that we were going to be a part of an HEB skit on top of the dugout. I think it was during the 3rd or 4th inning. And they were going to have a grocery list item, and I was in a banana suit. We had a crab. We had all kinds of different groceries. Well, Swatson ditched us at the beginning of this quote-unquote vegetable skit, and all of a sudden we're left up on top of the dugout by ourselves in a dance competition.
Yeah, Shane had come in and just started saying, we expect you to start dancing right now. It's a dance competition. Go. And that was it.
I was petrified.
I was actually doing the switching of that game. So basically the switching is I'm telling the cameras what to shoot, and I make the cuts that you see on the video board. And that's always the hardest skit to do. Now, we're told ahead of time what's going to happen in the control room. Obviously, not anybody in the field knows, but I need to know so I can get the right people on camera. But what makes it tough is Swatson just immediately runs off, and then you just have a bunch of interns who are staring at each other, all trying to say to me, wait, is this real? Do we have to do this? And they break out in the most awkward dances, and nobody better than you.
I mean, yeah, kudos to Swatson. I did not see that coming, and yeah, I mean, I broke out the dice move. I don't know if you've seen the movie Knocked Up with Seth Rogen and Jonah Hill. I went to the dice move early and often.
You
That's all I
went
had.
straight to the dice move. Like as soon as Swatson was off of the dugout, you went, I guess I'm going dice, and just started shaking it.
And the best too is I love how you release where you're like at the ankles too. So you're dicing it and dicing it low.
Yeah, it was a low dice, and went to a little Irish river dance at one point, and
I don't know what your obsession is with the river dance, man. Like, I mean, it's
you know what it is. I saw Chad Ochocinco. I don't know if it's Chad Johnson or Ochocinco at this point. He did it after scoring a touchdown one time, and I'm like, man, that looked cool. It was with the Bengals.
Did you practice it? Have you practiced
Absolutely.
that
Oh man, look at the mirror. I'm in front of that. I love that. I love that.
Yeah, the difference is Chad Johnson is celebrated on Sundays while you're dressed in a banana suit and you're like, it's going to look the same.
It's going to look great, right? Well, some person in the first row just started yelling at me, "You suck, banana." And I was like, man, like continually yelled at me. And I'm like, God, I know how these players feel now. This is not nice. I was like, I did not expect to be heckled as the banana. I didn't even know I was going to be dancing.
I mean, to be called out on your dance moves when a gingerbread man was right next to you, shaking it, and not really a dance moves, you had to have really sucked.
I thought I carried us.
Wasn't the ginger man doing the like the butter churn or whatever that thing's
Yeah,
called, where you're
something
kind of
like
like
that,
stirring the pot a little bit, and he was just doing it over and over. And I love how you get heckled. You suck, banana.
I know.
And then you come into the control room wearing a banana suit, and you're like, man, this guy in the front row is just letting me have it, just screaming at me, "You suck, banana."
I mean, he was like 5 feet in front of me. He was like, looking at me in the eye, like, "You suck." I'm like, I guess I suck. Like, I don't know what to say.
And that is a quote that we continue to say in the control room these days.
100%. Anytime somebody screws up on another team that like bumbles and fumbles in the air, we immediately yell out like, "You suck, banana." It's so much more fun to do it.
Yeah, I mean, Jessica Munoz, our field host, I remember her saying it too. I think she was the only one that like heard it. And she was like, "Yeah, man, they were giving him the business down there. They were really letting him have it."
And there's literally like 7 other people on top
I
of the
know.
dugout
There was
with
a
you.
lobster. There could have been so many other, I guess, choices that could have yelled, but bananas, man.
I mean, you suck, banana.
Yeah.
I guess it stood out. Well, that's going to end episode number 3 here on Down in Sugarland. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. You've been listening to Down in Sugarland.